Hey, gang. It is Kevin, and it is, well, I don't know how beautiful it is outside. It is a beautiful 6 a.m. on the dot this morning when we're recording this. So, I wanted to start out with. So, I know that I had promised, I had mentioned in previous episodes that I was going to discuss tiny homes, and I saw a regular listener kind of stirring it up on the Facebooks, the book faces, that I was going to be doing that this morning. So I had to finalize my research. Obviously, it's a deep topic, so it's probably going to be multiple, and that's probably going to be the title. Is there's going to be like a one after it, so that we can go over additional ones later. Um, yeah, and then we also have upcoming stuff. We have Delamore coming on the show on Tuesday afternoon, so that'll be up hopefully Tuesday night. We'll have um, I've already been reached out to by one incumbent alderman, and I am going to be working out a date to get him on the show. I got to see some in-person presentations by two of the three mayoral candidates last night, so that was kind of exciting. And then as well as the district attorney and one of the aldermen. Um, so yeah, we got a lot going on, guys, and actually after last night, I'm kind of realizing that I need to finalize some of my documentation, my research on the Allegheny River sewage discharge topic. So that'll be coming up here in the near future, and unbeknownst to mainstream media and social media, the results they may come to shock you in what the findings are and what people are leading you to believe. So that is exciting news, and I'm sure now you're all on the edge of your seat. But with that said, today's topic is tiny homes. So, and I know this is all a moment of contention. So in the city, and I believe I have the parcel, but it's over on Billington Avenue. Somebody, a local resident, is building a home. Um, and the it's not even a tiny home, actually, so that's why this all came up. Well, tiny homes, well, and is if you follow local social media, you would have seen that council president Alderman Crawford had been posting for I think what, like 2 years ago. He was posting like nonstop about tiny homes, like he was pushing for them, he wanted them, and it may be even longer than that. But the building code hadn't actually addressed it at the time, so maybe it was longer than no. No, he was talking about it when I was on the council, and then after I'd stepped down, he was still talking about it. So, but it got adopted by the New York State building code. So this is why a lot of you watch the channel, because I'm experienced in a lot of different areas. I was in politics for over 5 years. I'm still in politics. From the sidelines, just not like a player on the field, right? So I might be more of a coach now, but I've been in politics for probably over 10 years, if not more. I'm in the construction industry. I'm in HVAC industry. Because I was on the council and writing code law, I took code enforcement certification training. And then I keep up my education every year, my continuing education credits. So I am also not a certified code officer. I am certifiable as a code officer. In order to be a code enforcement officer, you have to be selected, and that be your So code enforcement is the magisterial power of a municipality. Kind of like judges have magistrate power, right? So it's like it's got that magisterial power aspect to it, right? So you have to be hired by a municipality for that purpose, and because of that, that's what gives you that's what imbues you with the power to be a code enforcement official. In order to get into one of those positions, you have to be code enforcement certified, and that is what I am. I'm not a code enforcement officer per se, because I am not. That is not my profession, right? So I'm not selected by a municipality, given those magisterial powers under my job title, to be a code enforcement official or code enforcement officer, right? So those are one of the things that, if I were to join the fire department or the local city, or be, one of the local, another municipality, not only and selected me to be, they said, hey, you applied for the position. We're looking for a building inspector, or a local code official. Like, that would then graduate me from just being a guy who's certified to be a code officer to being an actual code officer. But because I've done my code certification every year, I'm probably more apt to answer a lot of these questions than Joe Layman, the people on Facebook, things like that. But so I've been doing my research, and so it is funny. I find it humorous because I watch every one of the council meetings as well. I'm very, very well read in these topics. I'm sure there's a lot of people that do not like the fact that I'm well read in these topics, that that I can, that I watch these videos, that that's what the transparency is about, people. So, so I've done my research here, and I've talked to local code officials over the years, to get some answers. And so when this topic came up, one of the aldermen reached out to me to see if I could do some digging anyways, because there was a big stir. Apparently, this individual has bought a place on Billington Avenue, and it's causing a stir. All the neighbors are up in arms. Now, to give some background on the neighborhood, across the street from, I believe, what I think is the parcel they're building on, Google Maps hasn't updated it, so I don't have a live on the street view of what's been going on since 2022, but construction started within, I believe, the last year. They've built a house on piers. If you watch the most recent council meeting, Alderman Crawford called it stilts. Essentially, you're putting sonotubes in the ground as a footer, and just like your deck would be, you are fixing 6x6s or 4x4s, or depending on the size of your home, depending on the prescriptive build of it, you would then attach those to the sonotubes, making it a permanent residence, and then you build your floor structure from there. Essentially, you're building a deck. Like that's what building it on piers is. That's the same design as you would see most well-constructed decks. So that said, they're building it on Billington Avenue. So Billington Avenue is right off of Grossman. It's kind of behind Cutco area of town on the east end. And there's always been contention in that neighborhood because across the street from this lot that I'm looking at here on Billington, there's a huge field, and the local soccer team was working with somebody who owned the vacant lot to turn it in to a soccer field. And then all the neighbors were up in arms. We don't want kids in this neighborhood. We don't want this. I remember dealing with the alderman at the time, and then the newest alderman was dealing with it. And it's always been a moment of contention. They don't want anything to happen with it. And that gets me into a rabbit hole that you guys have probably heard from me before, is that most people, they use zoning, and I hate zoning. And this is why I hate zoning. Zoning like kind of subverts the American dream. So you say, oh, I don't have the money to buy the property next to me, but I want to make sure that somebody doesn't put in something I don't like next door. So I'm going to use zoning, and I'm going to petition zoning to make sure that they don't have crummy rentals, houses that look different than mine, houses that I don't like the color of, houses I don't like the shape of. They don't put in a bodega, like I don't want a 7-Eleven going next to my house. Well, guess what? This is the United States of America. And in the United States of America, there are property rights. And when you own a property, you don't have the right to tell your neighbors what they can do with their property. This does give you no right to do that. It gives you the right to do whatever the hell you want with your property, which is a beautiful thing. And then people will say, well, there's restrictions on that, blah, 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 blah. Like, there shouldn't be, though. Over time, people have put restrictions on it because other people that should have been fighting it have been sleeping, or did not know that there was a fight going on, and they were losing it by essentially not showing up to court. Like, they lost by default, which is a stupid reason to keep a restriction on the books. Like, there should be zero restrictions. If I had an argument with a realtor, and I'm sure this realtor will know who it is if they're listening. They said, Kevin, the reason there's zoning is so that somebody doesn't buy the house next to you or the property next to you and put in a pig farm. And my argument to that is, no, if somebody bought the house next to me or the property next to me and turned it into a pig farm, and I don't like a pig farm next to my house, that's on me. for not buying the house next to mine in proximity. And people would, now this is where the other argument is. And secondly, it's like, yeah, it's also my fault for not thinking of putting a pig farm there first. But secondly, if you don't want a pig farm next to your house, you buy the property next to your house. If you don't want a shitty rental there, if you want to change the color of the house, you buy it and become the property owner, and then you can do whatever the hell you want with that property. So by using zoning, you are subverting the government to do your will without having the financial stake in the game. You're taking my taxpayer dollars to make laws to prevent me from doing something with my property or that neighbor. I'm using me as the proverbial, like, I'm your neighbor if you're the one who's supposed to buy the property. And people say, well, but that puts an undue financial burden on me. No, it isn't, because your wants with that property aren't your needs with that property. You have no needs for that property because you don't own it. When you own it, when you possess that property's title, then you can do whatever you want with it. And then you also have financial burdens that you have to come with it. There are financial responsibilities. Every issue you have in this world is your problem, because it's causing you to have an issue, which makes it your problem. Me putting a pig farm on my property might cause you to have a problem, and you should do something about it. I don't think you muscling the joint effort of our government to tell me that I can't do something with my American freedoms. I think that you have the capitalistic and economic ability to save your money and eventually offer me money to buy the property so that you can condemn my pig farm. That's what I think. That's what I think that should happen. And people have this big issue that, well, no, the American dream is free. Bullshit. The American dream is you work hard, you earn money, and then you buy things with your money, and you make good decisions, and those good decisions come by slowly allowing yourself, or quickly allowing yourself, depending on how hard you are working, to excavate down to the golden bricks that are the American dream. That's where it is. That's where it comes into. Screw your zoning, screw your HOAs, screw your ability to tell me that, oh, no one can have a house that's canary yellow in this street because we only allow blue and green houses. Screw you and your color coding. This is America. If I want to put a single wide in my house, in my property, whatever. And then so for these people in this neighborhood, and this has always been my contention, well, the people own those houses in that neighborhood. Great. They own their houses. That the big lot across the street from a lot of those houses that they wanted to put a soccer field has been up for tax auction like 9 times, and no one has ever bought it. And I'm sure if you go back far enough, there's probably greater times that it's gone up for auction or been for sale or whatever. And I'm sure, and the current owner of it is not doing anything with it, so I'm sure you can make him an offer on it, and you can do whatever you want. If you're a neighbor in that neighborhood and you don't want a soccer field, but you want a pig farm, guess what? You can do it. You can do it, because this is America. This is America. You can do whatever you want when you buy the property. Not all rights just come to you. They come to you because of your ownership, because of where you are, your standing in the world, right? Your standing allowed you to buy that house. The financial capital that you decided to not spend on Coca-Cola and sugary drinks and video games and Pornhub subscriptions or whatever other hedonic vices that you went into and you wasted your money on, gambling habits, drugs, whatever. If you decided not to spend it on that stuff and you saved it, and then you said, you know what, I'm going to buy that place across the street and I'm going to put up 12 tiny homes so I can generate some income, so that I can buy a nicer property in a nicer neighborhood, or I can develop a nicer neighborhood, or I can buy my other neighbors out so they stop bitching about my tiny homes. I'm sure that just got cut out on the gate of my microphone, but yeah, no, that way you can buy out your neighbors, and then they can stop bitching because they don't live there anymore, because they don't own it. They might still live there. They might be your tenants now. And guess what? They have no say-so when they're a tenant. They don't get to choose. Oh, I want to do this. I want to do that. Yeah, with the landlord's written permission. Like that's the beauty of property ownership. You own it. So there's my rant on that. And so that is also my biggest contention with the gripe at the common council level, is that, well, we're getting complaints from the neighbors. The neighbors are all up in arms. I know I've heard they went to the mayor. Obviously, I heard that because I watched the council meeting. I know that they've reached out to the council. I'm guessing they reached out to the council president. I know they've reached out to the alderman of this ward. They're complaining about it, and Sure, you go ahead and complain. The problem is that there's nothing you can do. The local code office has stated that they are not violating any minimum safety standards, right? And that is what the building code is for. The building code is adopted by almost all states, if not all states, and it is there is one organization called the ICC, the International Code Council, and what they do is they compile building codes to meet safety standards. And they have all these different things, and there's different books and tomes that make their way through the building code. And so there's the International Building Code, the IBC. There is the International Residential Code, which is the IRC. They have the IPMC, which is the International Property Maintenance Code. They have the IFGC, the International Fuel Gas Code. So many different code books relating to different topics, and they kind of overlap a little bit. And that's what makes it very complicated. But every state adopts the ICC, and then like New York State, they have appendices. And these appendixes that are attached to every single, into certain areas where the state itself wanted to make adoptive changes to the code and rewrite them, they're in there. So once you find the section of code, then you check to see if there's an appendix for that particular code and if it references the section to make any edits. And then you're going to go off of the updated edits. And if you buy a New York State, and then the commercial building code and residential building code, and then you have just the anyways. So you're going to go off of these. So like if you're going to the IBC and you see a section, if you bought one specifically for New York State, it's going to have, they can have in them highlights and like lines through them and strikeouts and see appendix such and such. And they might even, depending on the version you have, they might even throw it in there, that section of the code that tells you what the change is. This is for, and I know they have the main ones that I can name off the top of my head in New York State, besides the part I'm about to read you, is the in New York State, they have an appendix like related to children's campgrounds, like summer camps, and they have one related to pools. Like those are the two like big ones that are popping in the top of my head. They have a lot of, like those are like New York State had something to say about it. But when you look at building codes and they look at things like that, engineers will look at, because a lot of engineers will also be code certified because they have to know it in order to engineer your home, right? They have to do compaction studies and soil samples, and like depending on where you're building in the United States or in the globe, they're going to have and these codes are all based on like other standards put together by like the international I'm drawing a blank on like one of them, but like you have maybe a company who is the industry standard on iron making, or you have a union of iron manufacturers, not like union workers, but like a union, like a group, a coalition of iron manufacturers that'll come together for an iron manufacturing code stating you like, well, in order for this steel to qualify for this strength rating, it has to meet these standards. And those are what manufacturers will base it off of. And that's what's built into the building code. Grading of lumber is in the building code, so that you know that you're not buying an inferior lumber, and there are certain universal stamps they put on stuff. These are very like, they seem like, like, wow, I didn't realize, most people don't realize they put this much time and effort in. And when you start your code enforcement training in New York State, I remember the guy, and I think he's retired now, but he was from the Department of State, who handles the code enforcements. And he was the trainer for our district, and I think he did a lot of other trainings throughout the state. But he had come in, and the first portion of the training is going under the International Fire Safety Code, the IFC. And so when he's going over those are protecting your home, and that's where the codes really came in from. And so while I'm a small government guy, and I don't think that the government should be managing all these other things, I understand where they came from when they're putting this together. They don't want you just going out in the woods and chopping down a cherry tree and being like, this should work. Or they don't want you going out and buying inferior whatever. There's a lot of landlords in the area that will just go on like Etsy Well, they'll go on Temu and they'll buy fire smoke detectors, and they don't work. They don't even have an UL listing. The UL is the Underwriters Limited, or yeah, underwriter listing. Anyways, they're a group of people that are underwriters, right? Insurance companies have underwriters, and they're essentially those are guys that are doing the research, guys and gals that are doing the research to make sure and prevent you from doing something like this. This meets certain standards, right? The UL listing is a very the UL is one of those code standards. And they're a group of people that are going in there making sure it meets certain minimum standards so that you don't use a Temu uh, smoke detector and it doesn't function. Like there are ones that you can buy on Temu that are like fake security cameras. They just have a blinking red light so that you know that the battery is operating and lighting the light, but it doesn't actually work as a smoke detector. It just is a white medallion that gets mounted to the ceiling with a bracket or the wall with a bracket, and it has a blinking light. And it says should not be used in, it's like this is a toy. This is for like when kids play house and they want to put smoke detectors in. Like this is like it says right on there to cover their ass so they don't get sued because you bought something dumb on Temu, and there are actual landlords in this area who have been criticized for using them. For good right. You're giving it's worse than not having one. If you didn't have a smoke detector, you'd be like, oh, I don't have a smoke detector, so I better be more diligent about smelling for smoke, looking for signs of smoke, looking for fire, being more cautious of fire, rather than saying, oh, that thing's going to protect me. And it's not. It's make believe. Like that is way worse. Putting something that doesn't function or that is falsely not going to function is worse than not having the device, because at least if you know what to look for, you're recognizing you don't have the device. Obviously, the code requires that there is no grandfathership to not having smoke and carbon monoxide detectors because they're a safety hazard. There is safety hazard to not have one in functioning order. Another rabbit hole. Sorry. So in New York State, you have Appendix H. Or no, not I keep saying Appendix H. Appendix H is for signs. Because I typed it in earlier. Appendix Appendix Q. Appendix Q was adopted in 2020 with the 2020 building code. So we're always behind on building codes. So right now we're currently following the 2020 building code. New York State adopted the 2020 because they want to vet it. They want to make their appendixes. They're going to make additions every year. So we went from like the 2016 building code, and we went right up through and just started adopting the 2020. And we adopted the 2020, I believe, in like 20 residential building code. Let's see. I think it even says it. It was adopted in New York State in 2019. So they must have already vetted it. And a lot of times the drafts are releasing before they actually adopt a code. So we adopted the 2020 building code, and that included New York State's Appendix Q, which addressed tiny homes, which was a concern at the time. People have been talking about tiny homes since like 2016. In 2018, they started getting bigger, and in 2019, and then so it says here September 27th of 2019, and became law within the 2020 code cycle. And then obviously it takes smaller municipalities once the state adopts it, and then it allows the individual municipalities to adopt it. And so until we adopt it, we're operating off the previous building code. And so municipalities are typically always doing that because there could be funding constraints. Like New York State's not going to give you this for your code office or give you this for whatever because the Department of State says you haven't adopted this newestly adopted New York State building code. And in order to enforce the building code, your code enforcement officers have to take tests and do trainings on the updates to the actual code, which can be built in and applied toward their continuing education credits. There's a lot of information I'm throwing at you, and that's why these are great for you to be able to download and watch over and over again. That's why we post these. That's why these are not live and one and done, just like old school legacy media. We can do these podcasts. I can do them. I can have them out there. If you have questions, you can always message us in the comments below. I can try to find my best. I can try to find the best information for you. I'm probably better at it than just asking other. Like every time I see somebody on Facebook that's like, oh, this isn't legal, and then somebody else puts some kind of legalese out there and says, well, this under this, and then other people are, actual lawyers are on there like, well, that doesn't apply. And then you have lawyers arguing with other lawyers and saying, well, that doesn't apply either, and it depends on what state you're in. And so there's a lot of conjecture, and it depends on the specifics of the situation. So Appendix Q applies to tiny homes, and that it also specifies, so it gives you restriction, it releases restrictions, saying that, if you're trying to build a tiny home, we're tailoring this to the tiny homes on foundations, and they're specifying on foundations because real property has to be affixed to the ground. So if you have an RV and you park it on a property, it's not a home. If you take it off its axles and set it on blocks, it is considered, depending on the municipality. But for the most part, the rule of thumb is if it's just like a trailer sitting on blocks, it's technically still personal property, the same as the RV with the wheels on it. But once you like hurricane strap it to the ground, now it's affixed to the ground. It is part of the real property. And then there's also a bunch of rules about moving them. So once they've been there for so long and they become real property and you try to move them, they're not personal property anymore. So you moving them wherever they land, wherever you wheel them to whether it's the trailer lot next to it or not, it has to actually come up to current building code. And so you would have to have the original stamp plans and find out what, or whatever design under the manufacturing HUD standards. And there are FEMA standards. There's so much to these codes. And that's why I was saying, like, I've done as much research as I can, and we're going to have to break this into multiple parts. We're 26 minutes into this. And I've addressed like constitutional rights, my take on zoning. So see, you hear the birds cheeping out there? It must be a beautiful morning. It must be. And to Dario, who commented yesterday and said it's not a beautiful morning because it's raining, or 2 mornings ago and said it was raining, I mentioned this in the comments, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, my friend. So specifically, the IRC in 2018, with state-specific tweaks, the 400 square foot limit for a tiny house refers to the floor area. So 400 square feet. So that's like a 40 by 10, a 20 by 20, however you break down the square footage, as long as you have a minimum, and that's excluding the loft section. There's also provisions in Appendix Q that move interior ceiling heights. So, for example, provided that they meet without counting towards the cap, providing the Appendix Q, the height is height and access requirements. Minimum ceiling height of 6.8 feet. I thought they said that there was a limit on it. Mechanical spaces, they allow you to, let's see here, they aren't included unless they're finished. So, crawl spaces and attics, conditioned versus unconditioned space. And this is what a lot of people are going to find funny. So Appendix Q does not distinguish between conditioned and unconditioned space. Conditioned space means that it's climate controlled. That means it's got a heat source. It's got a potential cooling source if you're down south and you have those types of requirements. They're the rule of thumb. Let's see here. Why is it? So conditioned space, habitable space and conditioned space are the same. Your habitable space has to be conditioned. Okay, so habitable space is bedroom, living room, and if you start adding other family room, dining room, those are considered living rooms, right? So bedrooms and living rooms are required to be conditioned space, which means that they have to maintain, during certain portions of the year, they have to have a heat source that can maintain 68 degrees. So usually it's September 15th to like March 15th is like the window in which it has to span for the code blue, the blue sector of the season. and and your heating source has to be capable. So if you have like a furnace that's undersized and it only heats part of the building, it doesn't heat the conditioned space to like more than 66 degrees, it doesn't meet the code, and you have to replace it with a unit, or find some sort of auxiliary heating that could additionally raise the temperature. So there are different ways that the code tries to achieve compliance. They're not really trying to go out there and reprimand people. It's their job to achieve compliance. So always keep that in mind. There are some municipalities, some code officers that get a little overzealous. They go on a power trip and they get very emotional. They want to, this is my right, this is my power. And they don't actually have that. Their goal is to achieve a compliance. And so if they can negotiate with you with a slow rollout of meeting compliance, at least they're attempting to achieve compliance with you. Because it's not their job to piss in your Cheerios. While like I said, some of them might think it's their job to piss in Cheerios. It's not their job. It's their job to achieve compliance. So you have a 400 square foot house. And let's see here, where's the breakdown? Because I've spoken with our local code enforcement office, and you have a minimum conditioned space requirement of 70 square feet. So, 70 square feet. Now, bedrooms and living room are conditioned or habitable space. You have to have conditioned habitable space of 70 square feet. So technically, if you have a small little house with a living room, bedroom, and I believe they can actually be intertwined into one room, that area has to be conditioned space. Which, here's the caveat. If you live up in our area, you want to have the bathroom and the kitchen conditioned space so your pipes don't freeze. But other than smaller, more restrictive codes, there is no requirement for that. You can actually take like an old porch you can build a porch on the house, or a little room off to the side that has your bathroom and kitchen in it. Because, let's see here, living room, bedroom, not habitable space per the IRC's definition under R202. Kitchens are for food prep and bathrooms are for sanitation. Neither of them require heating or cooling unless locally mandated. So, going into another little caveat here, when the state adopts a code, and then the city has, like, your municipality has like 30 days from the adoption of the code to reject a code if it is like stricter, right? So you can reject individual codes and say like, listen, no, we allow 8 inches for our grass, right? And the code is going from 6 to 4, or if the code's currently at 6 and we're at 6 because we never argued with it, they have 30 days once the code is being adopted by the state to actually like write the Department of State. That's actually in the they teach you that in code training. I've had conversations with the city attorney about that while I was an alderman. We've discussed it multiple times. He had disagreements with it, but that's what they teach you in the classes, which is taught by the Department of State. And so they say, if you want to rescind it and keep the less strict rule, you have to argue with us within a certain time period. And if you don't, you automatically go into the stricter policy, which would be the states. You could always go stricter than the code. So if you find out something and you're like, oh man, the code says this, it's already been here for so long, right? And you say, well, we don't want 4 inches of grass height. We want 2 inches. We want to really like hammer down on people. Well, under the property maintenance code and the grass heights and to mitigate ticks and everything, maybe you have a high tick content, and keeping the grass 2 inches or under, drops your tick rate by like 85%. Well, that would make sense for you to be more stricter, right? You're putting more onus on your constituents. Obviously, as an elected official, you have to talk to these people first and try to do some polling, try to do your due diligence. And then you have to advertise it in the whole 9 that you're putting in a stricter code change. And then when you submit it, you can like notify the state and Department of State, which is what you're supposed to do, that you are making a stricter code change, and then you adopt it into your local code. At which point you can have stricter ratings on the code. With Olean being a housing community, with Olean being a place where people deem that we don't have enough housing to accommodate people, I would see no reason why to make things stricter. We should have more people building houses in the city. And this is like a really like, as much as people don't like the way this thing looks, and we'll get an on-site visit here soon. Obviously, we can stand from the public right away and view into people's view onto people's properties, and so we might be able to get an on-site field trip here with the Life22 studios, maybe as soon as this weekend. Wouldn't that be exciting, folks? We're going on a field trip. So what I need everybody to do in the comment section below, I need to make sure that I have your parents' permission to take y'all on a field trip. Isn't that exciting? That's great. So comment section, write us an email. Just let us know that your parents say it's okay for you to watch Life22 go on a field trip. I'm excited to see how many people actually do something similar. So yeah, technically you don't have to condition the space for your bathroom or your kitchen. So like it could be -10 degrees outside, and your bathroom and your kitchen don't have to be heated. They don't have to be heated to 60 degrees. There's no like minimum has to be heated to 40 degrees unless specified by your local municipality. So you take an old house, a little single family farmhouse or whatever, like, or single room farmhouse, and you call that your conditioned space. You heat it. You put a small little mechanical room in to heat the place, and whether it's a boiler or furnace, whatever, mini split now because it's New York State. You put a mini split in that's capable of going down to pulling out air source, air sourcing from our coldest temperatures. I'd still put like a resistive baseboard heat if you're going to stick with electric, as a backup, which isn't expensive comparatively. It's more expensive on your electric bill than it is on the install. So you go in and you do that. Okay, great. Well, you're meeting if you just like boxed in the sun porch, right? Like an old front porch or a rear, side porch or whatever that somebody may have already partially screened. You box it in. It's on an overhang over the side of the house. It's on piers. You can put a bathroom and a kitchen in there, unheated. Obviously, you're going to have some maintenance nightmares. Like when it gets that cold out, it's going to have pipes freeze. When you go to take a poop in the middle of the night, like your butt's going to be cold because that toilet ain't going to be conditioned. So those are luxuries. See, because the code is going to minimum safety and health standards, and it's to protect people from fires. Like I said, when you're watching these code trainings, when you're in these code classes, and they show you like little like boarding schools and kids are going up like candles, like I'm not gonna lie, like it brought tears to my eyes. I'm sitting in a room full of firefighters and guys wanting to be code enforcement officers, and I'm shedding a few tears just like those guys. Like it's brutal to see like footage, photos, all just the horrendous things, and they happen at a lot of schools. That's why you can't build, wood structures over 3 stories. When you hit a 3rd story, you have to sprinkler the whole building. There are compliance measures in the code saying, well, if you want to build wood, you can only go 4 stories. And I'm grasping at straws here, so don't quote me on that. You can go a certain amount of stories, but once you're above 3, you're the 3rd story, and it's not grandfathered, you must sprinkler it. If you do any work on there to bring something up to code, you have to now sprinkler the whole building, and it's like sprinkling your building is very expensive. So if your building isn't worth that, then it might not be worth your project. And so, but those are little caveats that people don't really understand, is that you don't have to condition your bathroom or your you don't have to condition your bathroom or your okay, yeah, you don't have to condition your bathroom or your kitchen. So, and I want to do a little more diving here, because it's almost like a tiny home is a house under 400 square feet. And I think that maybe I'm misreading this. So I will get more clarity on this. The 400 square feet limit for a tiny home. So a tiny home is under 400 square feet. Okay, that makes sense. So a standard home is 400 square foot minimum, and this would allow you the exemption to be under 400 square feet. And so, but this provision, and this is where I dove in a little bit, right? So here's an example layout: 70 square feet of conditioned for the main floor for the living room, 70 square feet conditioned main floor for the bedroom, 50 square feet for the kitchen, unconditioned, 30 square feet for the bathroom, unconditioned. Total square footage, 220 square feet. So that's if the bedroom is on the main floor, or 150 feet if you're squeezing it into the attic or loft for the bedroom and conditioning the space. either fits in the 100 and the 400 square foot rule. So then I took it a step further and said, well, what if we decide to, um, can we allow for additional units? Like, what if you took that measurement, right, and got your 220 square feet and multiplied it by 2? Can you build a building that's under that? And the reason I asked this question was because I was off on my interpretation of it. So the Appendix Q only applies to single family dwellings. So at which point you would have to go refer to, because I even specify that I'm going to use a proper, let's see here, we're going to use proper fire separations, because once you have separate units, you have to have proper fire separations. There are things called fire walls, fire barriers. You have to use special fire rated materials so that one apartment can, your goal is not to make it fireproof, but fire retardant. And so this way you're slowing the burn. So if one apartment's on fire, you're reducing the risk of the fire spreading quickly. And so it allows firefighters more time based on certain areas, right? Like you want fire rated ceilings. So you want to make sure that you have like 5/8 inch drywall. Sometimes the code requires you to double up the the drywall. So now you need 2 layers crisscrossed in a different pattern, to create a fire separation. And you have to like just do a rough coat on the seams just so it creates that barrier, and the seams aren't all lined up either. And so it slows the fire rate down. And there's a whole process on doing that, so that you have one apartment doesn't burn the apartment above it, and the fire department has plenty of time to get in there, put out the fire, and then you can make repairs depending on the extensiveness of the damage to correct the unit and bring it back up to code. So yeah, and then so fire separations, we would move to the residential code, and for multi-unit buildings, which is the R2 minimum size. At which point, R2 minimum size, they talk about ceiling heights being 7 feet instead of 4.6. So much square footage for this. They're allocating stuff. And so you could take a home that is like 500 square feet, right, and put 220 square feet into each unit, and you can build a 2-family, essentially tiny home. And I say essentially tiny home because they're not a tiny home. They have to be under 400 square feet to be a tiny home, and it only applies to a single unit dwelling. And that is one of the issues of contention here. So if this person who's building something that's like, I think it's 370 square feet, so it's over 370 square feet, it's over 400 square feet, it's over what is considered a tiny home. So but it meets the minimum code standards. Minimum code standards does not mean that it looks nice. Property maintenance code allows it to be, like they don't want you to use, leave it like raw OSB, oriented strand board. They don't want you to have all the chips and everything exposed. It has to have a protective membrane on it. And it also depends on manufacturer's specifications. So if the manufacturer says like, this Tyvek coating, right? Tyvek is a brand, but you've seen the plastic 6 mil, whatever, breathable coating that goes on that creates a vapor barrier. They'll tell you in the instructions, in the manufacturer's description of the product, that this product does not apply to, like when you're using this product, you are using it as not to be exposed to the elements for so long, right? And so in that, it's not just a warranty thing. It is the building code will say, or check the manufacturer's specifications, because manufacturers also have to reference the building code and all of the different, schools of thought and all the different people that are in the building code. So, it's just one of those things. It's kind of an exciting little caveat to have. So that you're not going to have somebody leaving this house wrapped. If they're still in construction, there's an open permit. I mean, you can get the code office to be like, hey man, you're taking like 5 years to do this. Now, if this is your primary residence, there's a lot more exemptions for you, right? Like you can build the house without electricity. And that's to comply with people that, maybe have different religious exemptions. Like the Amish, they don't have, but they're still residents of New York State. They're still allowed to vote. Pennsylvania, same thing. You can build, or if you have a hunting camp, right? It's a seasonal structure. You don't have to have electricity because you might be in the middle of the woods and you can get by with, a propane heater, a propane furnace, something that, like, but you can't pipe in electricity out there. Or you don't want to run a generator. It's a hunting camp. You're going to scare all the deer away. Like, what are you thinking? So you can, temporary structures, things like that, your primary residence, because of maybe certain religious accommodations or for whatever reason, because of the religious exemptions of others, you don't have to have electricity. So if you're like, I just want to be a minimalist, I don't want screw electricity. I can use a wood cook stove outside. I can use a propane grill. I can suffice with my, to sustain my family without electricity. Screw microwaves. Like, if that's your philosophy, go for it. So we're going to try to wrap this up because we're on here for 45 minutes today. And I just want to let you know that we will be doing more dives into tiny homes and smaller buildings because it actually has piqued my excitement. And I would love to invest in my community by doing this because I think that I could get some good ROI on this. And if you'd like to know what ROI is, and if you don't already know, well, I suggest you Google it. But I'm sure we'll have more on the channel. We were looking at adding additional playlists on the channel that you can go dive into for finance, for investing, for return on investing. We're looking at growing the channel in multitude of different ways. We're going to be a one-stop shop for all of your different needs. And maybe you follow me down these rabbit holes on some of my pet projects. And so this one has turned into the owner of this property has really piqued my interest. And I would love to get him on the show. I think it'd be very interesting to get him on the show and ask him some questions about like the stuff he's dealing with from local municipalities. I hear that the code office is working well with him because he's in compliance. But how does that stand from a political standpoint? As most of you can see on Facebook, people are up in arms. Oh, well. But with that said, guys, we'll see you next time on Life22. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and your permission slips are due before this weekend. So get your parents to send in your permission slips to the comment section or to my email at life22studios@gmail.com. We'll see you guys next time.